Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to Upkick MMA, episode 217. I am Brennan. UFC 283, Teixeira versus Hill. We're going to go over the prelims here. If you're looking for the main card and the main event, that's in the last video. This one's going to break down each of the fights on the prelim card. If you're looking for a specific fight to be broken down, it's in the timestamps down below. Real quick, before we get started, subscribe to the channel if you like MMA, podcasts about MMA, fight breakdowns, discussion over bad judging and horrible rule sets. So I go over all that stuff here 2 or 3 times a week. Subscribe so you know the next video is coming out. All right. Let's start with the first fight on, or the featured prelim, the retirement fight of Mauricio Shogun Hua. Oh, yeah. Last night I put out the video. I literally recorded it the second the fight ended, the main event. I didn't catch that Teixeira also retired. So maybe I'll go over him. Maybe I'll go over Hua's career as well. We'll talk about it a little bit in here. I don't want to derail the conversation of each one of these fights. So there's a lot of fights to get to. There were a lot of finishes, so maybe we could throw it in there. All right, so this is Shogun Hua's last fight. He knew it going in. Hua also has the most fights in UFC light heavyweight history at 24. I think that's combined, including because they bought Pride, so his career, his fights in Pride count towards this one. Similar to like fighters who used to fight in the WEC, but I don't think Strikeforce counts. So Hua landed a 2-hook combo hard really early on. Oh, he's fighting Ihor Potieria. Sorry, none of the talk's going to be about Ihor. Ihor ended up getting the TKO victory here. It was really could have been a knockout too. The dude, it shouldn't have been close, and really it wasn't. There was one moment where Hua landed, like I said, a 2-hook combo hard on the chin, and he was using his kicks to keep what I consider the veteran pace. So a veteran pace, in my opinion, is someone like an Alistair Overeem, a Andrei Arlovsky, a Shogun Hua. These guys who are able to slow the fight down to maintain a pace that they, at their veteran status and their advanced age, can keep for the duration of the fight. It really breaks down to it. He's an older guy. His cardio is not what it used to be. He can't keep the same crazy pace that he used to. So in order to make sure that the opponent doesn't put that pace on him, he's got to do things. And the way Hua was doing it was by using teep kicks up the middle, using low kicks, keeping his distance against Ihor. It worked for a little while, and he was keeping the distance, but he just didn't make it out of the first round, so none of that really mattered. So maybe Hua going out on a shield, like coming out guns blazing, maybe that would have been the strategy instead of trying to eke by a decision win or maybe get not a lucky punch necessarily, but a difference. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe it would have been better if he just went balls to the wall. Maybe. But that's, Monday morning quarterbacking. I'm not going to do that. I think he fought a style that he thought he could win with. He just didn't. I mean, he got outstruck in this round, 21-17. He a right hand hurt him, and then he ended up getting dropped with a left hand and a right hand. He just got hit so much. Focus camera. I have not been a fan of watching Hua fight for the past 6 years almost. Even though he had that win against Gian Vellante and the win against Tyson Pedro, the win against Nogueira, and that was a split decision. I'm just not a fan of that stuff. These guys who are clearly diminished going into the later stages of their career, still fighting these up-and-comers. I understand that that's the model, that's the business model. I get it. Dude, so many fights. He was good back in the day, right? When he first came in, I mean, these guys, this is nothing. Evangelista Santos, that's a good win. That's Cyborg, I think. Right? That's Cyborg. Not a good record, but I'm pretty sure that's Cyborg. Cyborg Santos. Hanato Sobral, Babalu. He lost to him in IFC back in the day. That's a good loss, right? That's not really a stain on his record. Shoji Akihiro Gono, that's a good win. Yasuhito Namakawa, that's okay. Kanahara. Jackson's a good win. Nogueira back in 2005 is a good win. Alistair Overeem back in 2005 is a good win. Ricardo Arona is an amazing win back in 2005. A loss to Mark Coleman. I mean, Mark Coleman was gigantic back then. So, not, and this is already, what do I say? It's Mark Coleman's one of like the not pioneers of the sport, although kind of he is in the pioneer wing, I think. Anyway, that's not a bad win. Diabate, that's an okay win. An amazing win over Kevin Randleman. Again, back in 2006, was that really Randleman still? It's hard to remember. I think so. Nakamura, that's a good win. Alistair Overeem, again, back in 2007. That's a great win. That's before he blew up in size. A loss to Forrest Griffin, UFC champion. So this is his first UFC fight. And he had the loss to him. And then he actually beats Mark Coleman, and this is clearly a diminished Mark Coleman in 2009 at the tail end of his career for sure. A win against Chuck Liddell. That's a good win in 2009. Not necessarily the Chuck Liddell that was murdering people, right? This is not the same Chuck Liddell. That's not the same kind of win. A BS loss to Lyoto Machida, in which most people thought that Hua won. Sure. And then he beats Lyoto Machida. That's a good win. Lyoto is still good. That was the Lyoto era, even though it wasn't really so much an era. A loss to John Jones. Obviously, that's not nothing to turn your nose up at. But you can see here, right? Back in the day, when he's fighting in Pride, he's a monster. Now, you can make of that what you will, whether it be the lackluster competition in between the good competition, whether that be the less stringent drug testing or lack thereof, the drug testing or lack thereof. You've got the light heavyweight division always being historically weak, having a couple exciting fighters and then sometimes getting strong in moments and having competitive fights, but generally speaking isn't the most talent-rich division. And then he comes to, like I said, he's in the UFC and he's got a mixed record. Really, yes, I understand that he was champion, but he's got a mixed record. Wins, losses, wins, losses, wins, losses. And yeah, this might have been later in his career, right? Maybe his prime was back in 2004, 5, 6. By the time he got to the UFC, he was kind of on the decline. By 2009, 2010, he was on the decline, and he was still good enough to take the championship, so that's awesome. But, John Jones beating him at that point, I don't think this was Hua from back in the day. I'm not so disillusioned to think that Mauricio Shogun Hua was still as good in 2011 as he was in 2005. Like, he wasn't. That's why this win over Hua from John Jones doesn't loom so high on my amazing feats in history. Because look at who is beating him after this, right? Dan Henderson, who is, again, at that point, still pretty good. He lost to Gustafsson, Chael Sonnen. He beats James DeHuna. I hope so. It loses to Dan Henderson again, loses to OSP. And yeah, he beats a couple good people here in 15, 16, and 17. He got Corey Anderson, but that was, Corey Anderson 7 years ago. Was he as good then? I think he was still making, improvements back then. But if you look at this part of his career, right, from basically 2009 on, you're looking at, actually 07 on. Let's just look at his UFC career. Loss, win, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, loss, win, loss, loss, win, 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 loss, win, loss, or draw, win, loss, 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 right? So we're talking about a 50-50 career here, and that's who I think most people remember Shogun as if you don't know him from when he fought in Pride. Because in Pride, he was, regardless of what you think about, his strength of schedule, in Pride, he was a monster. Okay, he essentially had one loss in Pride. And that's the end of that. And we don't need to talk about it past that. He was amazing. Skilled, talented, athletic, crazy, hit hard, unorthodox style, always risking it. But the UFC doesn't play like that. Okay? The UFC doesn't give you 3 tune-up fights so you can match up with Fedor. Right? That's not how this works. So he's fighting upper tier guys, sometimes lower. Like, to be honest, when he rematched Mark Coleman in 2009, Mark Coleman was on his decline. Chuck Liddell was on his decline. So those 2 wins right there aren't exactly saying much, because we can look at that with perspective now and see, like, oh, maybe that's why. Because his first one was a loss to Forrest Griffin. And, the 2 fights with Machida, let's say he won both of those, fine. And then he fights John Jones. Okay, that's a hard one. Then he beats Forrest Griffin. And he's going back and forth against these guys. That's what I'm saying. Like, against guys who he should beat, he's beating them. And against the guys where it's going to be a challenge, he loses. So this whole thing last night where they're trying to make it seem like he's one of the greatest of all time, with a caveat, sure. I don't have him up there. For me, he was never that dominant force that we saw from some of these other guys. Right? In Pride, he was, but when he came over, you could really see the holes in his game almost immediately. And yeah, maybe the wars or all the damage he took, and that's fine. But had he left his career as champion, right? Let's say he retires as champion. Nobody in the modern era is going to know him, like from 2010, like from 2012 on, right? Because he's not in there anymore. John Jones doesn't get the same amount of star power immediately by beating him. So, but we remember him as basically a 3-loss fighter. I mean, technically 4, but really one of the best of all time. But now you look at it, and with the extension of his career, even with Anderson Silva, I think Anderson Silva's highs were much higher, and his lows weren't as low as Hua. Let's just put it. How about that? All right, and this isn't to say that everybody has to live up to that standard. Okay, but when you start saying one of the greatest of all time and historic and a trailblazer, absolutely, right? Trailblazer, innovator, you want to put all of those things there, absolutely. But when you start to get in the conversation of greatest of all time, well, now you're going to be compared to those guys. In my opinion, George St. Pierre is still the greatest of all time. Now, John Jones, with his career extending and going into heavyweight, I feel like he has an opportunity to sway me over to him, depending on his strength of schedule, how he wins at heavyweight, right? If he gets the heavyweight belt by beating Cyril Gane in convincing fashion and not a split decision, right? I don't, because it's also about who you're fighting and how you're beating them. Because if you're squeaking by and you're getting split decisions, in which they're controversial split decisions, in which he's had plenty, especially as of late, yes, they say W when you go to look at his Wikipedia page. But if you remember it, if you remember watching it, if you remember being a part of the conversation, you know historically that win is not as impressive as a guy who went out there and beat the brakes off of that same person. Okay? Jan Blachowicz' win over Dominic Reyes is much more impressive than John Jones's. Okay, I don't think that shouldn't be controversial to say. I don't care about what was wrong with John going into that fight. That's not a conversation to be had because he's had so many of them now. So if you want to put Hua into that conversation, well, now you're going to have to start comparing him. And when I compare them, I'm going to compare them to the GSPs, the Anderson Silva, the John Jones, I guess the Khabib, but I don't have Khabib up there. He just didn't have enough data points for me to plot. So if you look at someone like Anderson Silva's career, who I don't even have him as the greatest of all time. For me, that's still GSP. It just is. I've explained it previously, but the long and short of it is he beat every single person that he fought. Yes, he had a controversial win against Johnny Hendricks, but essentially his career is unblemished when it comes to who he fought, because every single person that he fought, he beat them. Yes, he might have lost to a couple, but he ended up beating them. He retired. He went up a weight class, and yeah, he beat Michael Bisping. People want to dog him. Dude, Michael Bisping knocked out Luke Rockhold when everybody was high on Rockhold. So you can't have it both ways, guys. You tell me how good Luke Rockhold is, and then he gets knocked out by Bisping with one eye. And then tell me that Michael Bisping isn't good or he got lucky. That's crap. I don't want to hear that stuff. So anyway, GSP's strength of schedule, crazy good. GSP's record, crazy good. Anderson Silva, strength of schedule, mostly good. In fact, while he was in the UFC, all very good, crazy good. Let's just put it that way. And even back in like some of his older fights, sure, really good. His record, crazy good. His style, the way he was beating people, that's the other thing for these two, crazy good. But let's look at Hua, 27-14. So his highs weren't as high as Anderson Silva, right? He wasn't this dominant, unbeatable force where he felt untouchable. Yes, he did. He was great. And he went up and fought Mark Coleman, who is way bigger than him, and he lost to him. Okay. And then he beats Kevin Randleman, who's bigger than him, and he beats Alistair Overeem. And that's great. But even when, even on the tail end of his, prime here, he loses to Forrest Griffin, and then he starts his UFC career in he becomes a 50-50 fighter, in which the lows of his career are extremely low. It's depressing watching him fight. He looks like a shell of himself. Okay, Anderson Silva didn't have that. Yes, he diminished, and he's not the same fighter that he used to be. Who cares? His lows were not as low, and his highs. He has one of the longest winning streaks of all time. The longest, as far as calendar, I think he held it for the most days. That's not the end all be all. He also had like 7 consecutive title defenses or 8. You know what I mean? Hua didn't have any of that. He had plenty of good fights. He had the belt. He defended the belt. I get it. He was a really good fighter and like one of the greats in Pride. Absolutely. But if you look at his career as a whole, you have to take into account the lows, whether you like it or not. You could say maybe he fought too long. Fine, but then he fought. That's like giving him an excuse saying, oh, well, he fought way too long. And, if you look back in the day, he was one of the greatest. Is anybody like Fedor right now, is it going to tarnish his career? Probably not, because he's still getting wins every so often. But you don't get that in the UFC. They're not giving you give-me's. So, do I think he's an innovator? Absolutely. Do I think he's historically one of an important figure in MMA? Absolutely. Do I think him coming over to the UFC was integral in boosting the profitability and the career advancement of other fighters in the UFC? Yes, I do. Because he's one of those guys who's a diehard. Like, if you're a diehard MMA fan, you know about Shogun Hua. Outside of that, does anybody know who he is? And I'm not blaming anybody, and I'm not saying that means anything about him as a person or a fighter or a skill level. I'm just saying, does he transcend the sport? I don't think so. Anderson Silva does. GSP does. Hell, Conor McGregor does, and he's not even one of the best. That run, that's a great example. Conor McGregor, from year this to year that, was one of the best fighters in history. Great. What about before or after? What about after? What about that? Oh, well, he was is it because he's not old and that's why you give him an excuse? You compete when you compete. You stop competing when you stop competing. And I get to look at your career as a whole. GSP was winning until he retired. Anderson Silva had competitive fights until he retired. I don't know what you want me to tell you guys. I'm sorry if you're a huge Shogun Hua fan, but that's just the nature of his career. He stayed in too long and wasn't able to keep up anymore. His body gave out on him. That's the Shuto box style. It's unfortunate that's I know that sounds kind of sour, but it is what it is. I like him. I like watching his old fights. Nothing about his late, the last 7 years of his UFC run make me excited. I wish him nothing but the best in his future endeavors. I really do. But I'm glad he's out. Okay. Brunno Ferreira versus Gregory Rodrigues. This one ended pretty spectacularly. Good grief. Both guys were landing with some heat early. You can see they're both landing really well. 22-21 in favor of Brunno. That last one is what did it. Brunno landed a left hand and put him straight the fuck out, man. It's pretty bad. Go back and watch this one. I don't got much to say because I can't break much down from Ferreira other than he was able to put away Rodrigues, who's extremely tough. So I know that means Brunno hits hard. Okay. That's what I can gather from that is that Brunno hits really hard. Cool. Other than that, I mean, you're not gonna get much from me on that. There's just not that much there. All right. Let's see here. Thiago Moises versus Melqouizael. Melqouizael Costa. Good grief. Sorry about that. Melqouizael Costa. So I'm going to call him Costa so I can get through this. Costa was throwing a lot of kicks out there. He was very excited to be in there. Super happy. This is his UFC debut. Thiago was working for over a minute to get a takedown. He finally did get it in this first round. The Costa actually landed more damage in this first round, 16-9. Costa got back up after he was taken down. He was controlled down there for 2 minutes and 50 seconds, but Moises really didn't do anything. So I actually gave that first round. Thiago did land well down the stretch and his control time. I said, you know what? I actually gave that round to Moises. Looking at these striking numbers, maybe I shouldn't have, but I gave it to Moises. Let's see. What did everybody else do? Yep. All three judges gave it to Moises. That's what I wrote down. Looking at the striking numbers can be deceiving. I'll go with what I wrote down because that's what I saw at the moment. In the moment. Moises landed a really great right hand. He was working for he worked and got a really good double leg. And then Thiago landed some elbows from the top. He kept control. He got the back and a rear naked choke finish. Moises is he's a tough son of a bitch, man. He's a hard challenge for anybody. Christos Thiagos is the guy he beat last. I mean, he lost to Islam Makhachev, which is everybody has, so that sucks. Demir Ismagulov and Benil Dariush are his losses. Well, other than Joel Alvarez, like most of his losses have been to top tier talent. So, yeah, Moises he's legit, dude. That was a tough challenge for Costa to come in there, and I thought in the first round he did really well. If he can dial it back a little bit, kind of control himself just enough without taking the excitement away from him, but kind of dialing it in and utilizing it a little bit more effectively, I think he could be a pretty good fighter. All right. Gabriel Bonfim knocking out. No, he got the guillotine finish. So against Mounir Lazzez. So Bonfim, as he's landing this lead hook multiple times. I thought he was going to knock him out with it, but Lazzez ended up trying to mix it up. He went for a takedown, got caught into a guillotine, and then Bonfim got the finish. So he had a brother who fought earlier on the card. We'll talk about him here in a second. But first, I know I'm flying through these now, but there's, again, like I've said, there's not a ton to break down in each little fight. Shamil Abdurakhimov versus Jailton Almeida. Not much to tell you here, guys. Again, Shamil caught a kick right away. He landed a right hand, so Almeida went for a takedown. So that was the one strike that he landed. So it was Almeida got the takedown, stayed on top for the whole round. If you look at his control time, 4 minutes and 45 seconds. In that position, he did land 14 strikes. Jailton didn't land any strikes until like about 15 seconds left. It was kind of boring the way he was doing it, but you could tell he was being very deliberate, looking for a finish. He was kind of just waiting there on top. Not something I would I don't recommend going back and watching this fight. There's not much to see here because you got to sit through a whole round of that. Jailton got the takedown right away in the second round. Almeida was throwing small strikes, trying to get the TKO, staying safe, not really taking risks. Smart move on his part. I feel like he should have got the finish in the first round. I didn't feel like I should have to watch that for 8 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Like watching him screw around for 8 minutes, looking for a perfect finish, kind of playing out there. I get it. He stayed safe and he did what he needed to do. But as far as like an entertainment product, I wouldn't go back and watch that one. Let's put it that way. Great fight for him, absolutely. Dominant performance. The dude beat the brakes off of Shamil. There's no two ways about it. It's just not much that you can go back and gain by watching that one. Cody Stamann versus Luan Lacerda. So Cody Stamann ends up getting the split decision win here. What? Unanimous decision? I thought it was split decision. Oh, all right. Luan landed a couple kicks to the body and the legs. He was more stationary and putting a lot behind his shots. He was landing heavy shots. Stamann was darting in and out, landing on the inside, blocking most of the heavy kicks, but Luan was landing more big shots than Stamann did that round. Stamann did close the gap at the end, but I just didn't feel like he did enough to win that round. Now, if you look at the control time, there's 0 because he didn't get a takedown. He didn't really do anything in the clinch. There wasn't a ton of like real dominance by Cody in that first round. And I felt the bigger shots came from Lacerda, right? I felt like he did more damage in that first round. I gave him that first round 10-9. We will go look at the judges' scorecards in a second because I want to see how they scored this. Second round, this was Stamann's round, all right? Counter combos, ending with a low kick from Stamann, taking him off his, it took Luan off his feet for a second. Neither guy was using the jab much in this up until this point. Luan started throwing hooks to the body. Stamann was landing up top and to the body. Stamann was using those hook combos to the body and going up top. Luan was really slow and plotting, and he wasn't able to corral Stamann this round like he did in the first round. So he didn't really corral him in the first round either. He just made him pay for darting in more, and he was able to land some of those bigger kicks. So I gave this round to Cody 19-19. And Cody was up on striking numbers. So in that first round, like I said, I gave that to Lacerda 31-29 in favor of Stamann. But here's the thing. 2 strikes do not a round make. I felt like the damage from Luan was more in that round. In the second round, 52-33 in favor of Cody. That was a much bigger gap, and that's how I scored it. Last round here, Luan got 2 takedowns, no subs, no damage. So that stinks, but he did have control. So that's 1 minute and 34 seconds of control time. Keep that in mind as we go through here. Stamann really slowed his output. I didn't feel like he put as much out here, and it shows, right? So in the first round, Stamann attempted 66, then 87 in the second round, and then only 36 in this last round. So his output definitely went the way of the dodo. Stamann slowed. There wasn't much coming back at him either. So Lacerda also slowed down, but he didn't do enough. It looked like he was coasting because he thought he won the first 2 rounds. I don't agree. This is where I might differ. So I actually gave this round to Lacerda, and I don't know if Stamann thought he coasted to a victory here, but again, 2 strikes, 20-18 in favor of Stamann as far as significant strikes landed. 2 strikes do not a round make. You have to land more significant strikes, and I felt like Lacerda landed enough in that round. Plus, with the takedown, if you want to count the damage as even, the takedown and the control puts Lacerda over the top. I definitely gave him that last round, and that might have been Stamann's thinking, though. He's like, okay, I gave up this round, but I'm staying safe. I'm not getting finished. I clearly won the first 2 rounds. I disagree. Let's look at the scorecards. All 3 judges gave Cody Stamann that first round. Now, I don't know Halison Pontes. I don't know Rafael Ferreira. I don't know either one of them. I do know of Derek clearly. So, all 3 judges gave Luan the first round, the last round. I agree. The first round here, nobody gave that to Lacerda. Maybe I'm off my rock. Maybe I miswatched it. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to go back and watch this. I don't think it's a robbery, right? I thought it was close enough to, obviously the striking numbers were close. I just felt like Lacerda did enough damage, and he was constantly moving forward. So, again, if you want to break it down to who's the aggressor, who's the one controlling the octagon, who's the one trying to finish the fight, I would say it's the guy who's plotting forward. Now, his movement wasn't excessive. He wasn't jumping around. And we've seen it before, all right? We've seen this before. I can't remember the fighter's name. Oh, good grief. But he won a round. It was, Ayman Zahabi fought him. And the first round, clearly Zahabi won if you looked at strikes landed. But the other guy was jumping around, doing all the stuff that looked like he was doing things, but he wasn't. Zahabi. Ayman Zahabi. Yeah. Ricky Tercios. Right? Ricky Tercios. He was jumping around, making all kinds of noise, making all kinds of movements, but he didn't land anything. He landed like 2 strikes that entire round. Or 10 strikes. It doesn't matter. He landed way less. But that I mentioned it then, and it's important for right here, especially from my perspective. Movement does not equal aggression. Just because you're moving a lot doesn't mean you're the aggressor. For example, if you run away from your opponent, you're moving more, but that doesn't mean you're the aggressor. So Ricky Tercios, and it also is an effective offense. Ricky Tercios was making noise. He was key-eyeing. He was jumping around. He was making all kinds of crazy moves, but he wasn't landing anything. So that's in a scenario where he clearly should have lost that first round, and they still gave it to him. And I said it when I reviewed that fight, that worries me. That worries me a lot. It shows me that you can trick the eyes and the ears of a judge into your favor by just making enough noise. Whether it's visual noise or audible noise, but just making enough noise, you can get around. And now we're talking about a fight in which the stats are actually pretty darn close, right? 31 strikes to 29 in favor of Stamann. So because of that, where the judges might even think that that they landed the same amount because they don't get the score, they don't get the striking numbers. So you're looking at a round in which it was pretty close striking wise, numbers wise, but Lacerda was the one who was moving forward. It's just Stamann was jumping around, darting in and out, moving around, blah 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 blah. Blah. He was the active one, and I feel like that swayed the judges. Now, I could be wrong, and if you came at me with an argument saying, "Oh, clearly Stamann won, and here's why," using the scoring criteria that's been set out, I'm all ears. I'm not against him winning that round. I'm just saying that I've seen it happen before, so don't tell me it can't happen. It can, and if that's what happened here, that's terrible. It's terrible. That shouldn't happen like that. Good win for Stamann, though. All right, Ismael Bonfim taking on Terrance McKinney. Oh, boy. Unfortunate for McKinney here. Nice knees up the middle for as Bonfim was entering, but McKinney just wasn't able to find a rhythm. He was just always seemed on the back foot. He seemed like he was off. Bonfim landed a few hard straights. Terrance was he was not staying tight on his defense. So every time he would go in, he would return, and every time he would throw out an attack, he wouldn't stay disciplined on his return and go to put his hands in a defensive position. It was not good. And at one point, Terrance screwed up a back take and lost position. He wasn't able to land much in that first round. He actually lost it on the numbers, obviously 17-7 in favor of Bonfim. And then in the next round, McKinney was he's exposed on all of his attacks. He was taking damage, a big right hand from Bonfim, and then a knee put him right out. It was bad. Like, he landed a flying knee to the side of the jaw and put him right out. Now, I will tell you, that did not look like Terrance McKinney. That did not look like Terrance McKinney. I don't know if it's because he was trying to stay more disciplined and save his energy because of his last loss. I don't know if he's taken damage. I don't know if he was hurt going into this. I don't know if it's Brazil and some wacky stuff happened. Maybe he ate some weird food. Maybe he flew down there for whatever reason. If something came up, I could understand why he didn't look the same. So that did not look like Terrance McKinney to me. I am still high on him. I want to see how he looks the next time because that did not look like him at all to me. Great win, though, for Bonfim. Great win. Like, what a way to start out your UFC career. All right, this weirdo, in a good way. It's just the way he breathes. It's so loud. Nicolas Dalby getting the win over Warlley Alves. What a great win for him. So Alves was in his face immediately. Dalby was sticking to a jab and a low kick with good pressure, and he would clinch for a bit, right? So he really wanted to crush the distance between him and Alves. He didn't want to stay at distance and let Alves swing big. So anytime he would get in those exchanges, he would crush the distance, move in, and push him back. Alves landed some hard kicks to the body, but Dalby was putting out so much volume, and he had so much control in this first round. Minute 39 seconds of control, mostly in the clinch against the cage. Yeah, 35 strikes landed to 18 of Alves. And yes, number of strikes landed is not the end-all, be-all, but I felt like he did more, even with the bigger shots that were coming from Alves. In the second round here, Alves worked to get a takedown. He gave position and then reversed it to take top position. That was actually really freaking cool. He actually had more control in this round, 1 minute and 19 seconds, and some of that was on top. But Dalby ended up working his way up, working Alves back to the cage, and he had 53 seconds of control time himself. Dolby Vision, Dolby surround sound. Dolby's output was really starting to wear on Alves. I had him up in this round too. This one would be the one I guess maybe you could give to Alves, but I gave it to Dalby as well. 31-18 in terms of significant strikes in favor of Dalby yet again. Last round here, Dalby with the constant pressure. Again, Warlley started the round off with a ton of output, but then he slowed down, wasn't able to keep up. But he did output. He knew that he had to get a finish because he felt like he was down 2 rounds. He did land more strikes in this round than any round previous. He attempted twice as many. Actually, he attempted more strikes in this last round, as many strikes in this last round as he did in the first 2 rounds combined. Alves landed a right hand that landed really hard. Dalby had more in the tank, and he just kept peppering him with shots. He just kept peppering, 53-30 in terms of those significant strikes. Dalby ended the round with pressure against the cage. I said that last round could go either way. I have it 3 rounds to Dalby, though. I'm interesting to see because everybody had a 29-28. Did everybody give that last round to Oh my. Derek clearly gave 2 rounds to Warlley Alves. He gave 2 and 3. Oh, okay. Saul D'Amato, good job, man. Good job. Fabio Alves, I don't know you. I've never heard of you. But Saul D'Amato, hey, guys, he did it right again. Derek clearly is the one that screwed up. Let's note that. Remember, it's not always Saul D'Amato. It's not always his fault. He did the right thing here. Do the right thing. All right. Second to last one we're going to cover. What is her name? There's no way I can. I wrote. Josiane Nunes versus Zara Farron. This is weird. Farron started out hot and heavy. Like she's huge, man. Like huge. She's gigantic. She looks like she belongs in 2 weight classes above Nunes. She landed hard uppercuts and hooks. Farron does not move her head at all, but she wasn't fazed by any of the shots coming back at her. Farron looked tired, and she was just standing still near the end of this round, and Nunes was able to close the gap in terms of significant strikes. But she was out in front enough to take that first round for me. She outlanded her 48-41. I still had her winning that first round. So Farron looked tired, and she's just standing still now. That was the last round. Nunes was pressuring. She landed hooks on Farron. Farron looks so freaking tired. Nunes isn't slowing down, and the pressure and the output is winning. I had it 1-1. Now, somehow, somehow Farron landed 35 significant strikes. I don't know what those were, but I don't believe it. I watched that fight. I didn't see her landing more than Nunes in this round, so I don't know what they were counting there, but I had it 19-19 going into the third. Nunes was in her face on the fence, throwing those left hooks and landing on the chin. Ferrin had nothing left down the stretch of this fight. I had it 29-28 for Nunes. And yes, if you look at the striking numbers, 34-34. So they were tied, but I definitely had Nunes winning that round. I want to go look at the scorecards here. Make sure I'm not crazy. Yep. That's what everybody else had. So there's that. And the first fight of the night. First fight of the night, Daniel Marcos versus Simon Oliveira. This one was weird. Go back and watch this one. You see some ballerina stuff. I mean that it is just weird. I'll explain. So Oliveira kept throwing these spinning things. It's just nonstop. I don't know how he wasn't dizzy by how much he threw. Both guys have landed back and forth. It seemed like pretty much the same amount of strikes at one point. But Oliveira was spinning around over and over like a ballerina. I leaned towards Oliveira in that first round, and I don't know why. I don't know if I missed something. Clearly, Marcos won that first round as far as significant strikes. I thought they were closer, so I was wrong. Marcos hurt him in the second round, and he dropped him for a second. Marcos started to unload, and Simon kept trying spinning shit, didn't land anything, and needed the body from Marcos, put him down, and ended the fight. So, good win for Daniel Marcos in the second round via TKO. Or, I would say a KO. Needed the body. Excellent win for him. That is it. That is all for UFC 283. If you are looking for the prelims or the main card, it's in the last video. I appreciate y'all for stopping by. It means a lot to me. If you do like this stuff, if you felt like you would enjoy watching more of this from me, subscribe to the channel so you know the next video is coming out. 2 or 3 videos every single week, breaking down fights, doing all that stuff. I appreciate y'all. It means a lot to me that you spend your time here. If this is the only video you watch this weekend, thank you so much. I love y'all and have an amazing week.